Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone. Je suis extrêmement heureux de vous accueillir aujourd'hui pour cette nouvelle conférence virtuelle de l'initiative IA et Société. I am delighted to welcome you today for a new AI and Society virtual event. For those who don't know me, my name is Florent Martin Barreto. I am an associate professor of law, the University Research Chair in Technology and Society at the University of Ottawa, and the director of the AI and Society initiative that is co-presenting this event with the University of Ottawa Center for Law, Technology and Society. For today's virtual talk, I'm delighted to be joined by Chantal Rodier and Professor Jason Millar to explore the power of arts in criticizing and having a critical approach to AI research and technologies. Chantal Rodier is an artist in residence and a STEAM, STEAM project coordinator at the Faculty of Engineering of the University of Ottawa. And she brings students from arts and STEM together in a project-based learning environment. I think it's super cool initiative from the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering. And so she will be today in conversation with also our colleague, Dr. Jason Millar, who holds the Canada Research Chair in Ethical Engineering of Robotics and AI, and is an assistant professor at the University of Ottawa's School of Engineering Design and Teaching Innovation, and is also the co-lead of the AI and Inclusion stream at the initiative. And in addition, is also the Distinguished Research Director at Partnership on AI. Without further ado, I will now hand it over to Jason and Chantal for their conversations.
Thank you, Florian. I really appreciate the introduction. I'm very excited to be here. The speaker series that you put on is fantastic, and I've attended so many of them over the last few years. Just happy to be included in the roster. You're doing great work, and I wanted to just sort of welcome everybody here for this conversation. So Chantal and I are going to be talking about some of the work that we've been doing in collaboration through the what we're calling the Cradle STEAM Collective. We'll talk a little bit about that. This is at the lab that I run here at the University of Ottawa. We'll be talking about a couple of the art projects that we collaborated on, and just kind of how we do our work. And we're hoping to keep this very informal. I guess it's just my style. I seem to start all of my presentations with this disclaimer. So Chantal and I talked about this just before we started today. And we're open to having questions throughout the presentation today. So I'm going to say feel free. I've got the pen. I can see the participants. I think I don't know, Florian, if people are able to raise their hands or whatever, put things in the chat or however the best way is to moderate questions. We're happy to take questions throughout the presentation. If there's something that we talked about that you'd like some more clarification on before we move forward, very happy to take that approach to the conversation today. So yeah, I've got my chat on, I've got my, I can see your hands, so please feel free to do that. I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm getting over a cold and a flu, so I may cough unexpectedly. I don't know, this has been happening in the last few days. So if it comes in loud and clear on the mic, I'll try to mute first, but just be warned, it may happen. So today we're going to do a brief introduction to Cradle, the lab that I run here at the University of Ottawa, and talk a little bit about the STEAM Collective. Then we'll give an overview of these two art installations that we developed through generous funding from the AI and Society initiative. And then we'll talk about, some of the things that we learned from doing those, what the purpose of those, what the purpose of the art projects were, in the larger research perspective and context. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we learned and what we're using from those learnings, and how this project really helped us to develop a plan going forward. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of future research that we're planning. the intro that Florian gave was great, but I will take a couple minutes just to allow Chantal to introduce herself, and then I'll give a brief introduction to myself as well. This is important. I always do this, and not just to let you know who I am and kind of like talk about the credentials and all that, but more to really frame the context of what we're doing, because I think you'll find that understanding where Chantal and I come from professionally, our backgrounds, really helps to understand what our motivation is in doing this type of work. So Chantal, I'll let you, why don't you jump in and give an intro, and then I'll jump in right after you.
Sure. First, thank you, Florian, for giving the bio, but to add to it, yeah, I consider that I have a STEAM background, and STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And I have a first degree in math and computer science from the McGill University. And I've worked in the high-tech industry in terms of development of visual simulation software for aerospace and defense for about 15 years. And then when I moved here in Ottawa, I decided to go back to my other side of my brain, and I went back to do a visual arts degree. And I have been working in the arts since, in terms of managers of arts, an arts management program here at the University of Ottawa. I also teach at the Faculty of Art. I've established the public art policy for the campus here at Ottawa U, and manage public art commissions and install them, and also organize large events like the Junos and things of that nature. So since 2017, in one of the public art commission, I've kind of knocked at the door of the engineering faculty to see, could we work together on STEAM projects? And I realized that they were very open to it. So since that time, I've been bringing artists and engineers to work together in classrooms and in project-based solutions and projects. So that's what I've done. And as such, I've become the artist in residence of the Faculty of Engineering. And I'm pursuing now a PhD in STEAM, and I'm the SSHRC doctoral fellow and adjunct curator at Ingenium. And recently, I've become a member of Cradle, where I work in collaboration with Jason, and we will present some of our work today.
Great, thanks, Chantal. Yeah, so actually, I learned something about you today. I didn't realize that you worked in aerospace and defense. We also have that in common. So, so getting to that, I started my career as an engineer, and I worked in aerospace, a little bit in defense, the company that we work for, did some work in designing telecommunication stuff, but then really got interested in philosophy and ethics, and decided to pursue academic studies in philosophy. Over the years, really turned my attention to applied ethics of robotics and artificial intelligence. And so that's how I've landed in the role that I have today. But really, it speaks to what I do in my work. So what I ended up, getting into was really taking the insights from ethics and philosophy and finding ways to merge them into engineering practice to really provide tools and frameworks that engineers, computer scientists can use when they're doing technology design. So in order to bring that ethical lens to their work. So a lot of the work that I do is interdisciplinary. Actually, all the work that I do is interdisciplinary. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the upcoming slides, but just to frame it. So Chantal and I both, coming from these backgrounds with combinations of, some technical skills, engineering skills, and then bringing, lens from the arts, from the humanities, from me a little bit from the social sciences, and sociology, bringing that to bear on policy and on engineering practice. So let me move forward here, and we'll get into talking about Cradle. This is where the work happens. So it's the Canadian Robotics and AI Ethical Design Lab here at the University of Ottawa. The physical space is located in the Faculty of Engineering, but obviously it's also a kind of conceptual space, especially was so during the last few years during the pandemic when everybody disappeared. Cradle remained, the space remained, but we work virtually to a large extent. The three areas of research that really happen at Cradle are this focus on applied ethics. So this is where I'll bring issues from philosophy and ethics into talking about technology, talking about policy, talking about engineering practice. We also focus on engineering practice specifically, asking questions like, what do engineers need, or how can we support or empower engineers to bring ethical considerations into the design room? What does that look like in practice? And then, of course, looking at the law and policy. Over the years, I've just gotten involved in all sorts of issues in, regulating technology, whether it's autonomous vehicles or, looking at how governments adopt automated decision making and kind of govern that practice of adopting that into the work that they do. So at Cradle, we're always, when we do research, looking at least two of these overlapping areas. We tend to work in the overlapping areas of this Venn diagram rather than in the siloed areas, and that's by design. It's very much by design. And just to give you a sense of that theoretical grounding that really drives the work and gets us into that overlapping area, this is kind of the picture that that we work from at Cradle. And this is this is a modified version of these slides, because now I want to talk specifically about art and artists. But the assumption here, or the understanding here, is that when we're working in our siloed knowledge domains, so engineers are kind of doing their engineering work, ethicists are over in the philosophy department doing their philosophy work, maybe artists are in the fine arts department, doing things over there. There tends to be, we all develop our professional frames. And what I mean by that is there's kind of like a hard line, like a thick-ish line between those knowledge domains and those sets of practices where, engineers kind of like go around their business. Like, this is how we do our work. This is the kind of questions we ask. This is the way that we approach our work methodologically speaking. And similarly for everybody else. So this should not be surprising. I mean, we've all experienced this, especially those of us who've tried to do interdisciplinary work. When you come together, it can create issues, right? Like these professional frames. They prevent us from speaking the same language. When we're asking what's an important research question, oftentimes there'll be some overlap, but it's not quite clear how to work together in any deep and meaningful way. And so we all bring our own discipline-specific values and practices to bear on the work that we do. And the goal that we're shooting for at Cradle is breaking through that barrier. So really taking that solid line that divides these traditionally siloed areas of practice and breaking it down by developing what we call interactional expertise. And this comes from research on sociology of science and technology, so SDS. And really what it involves is bringing people in close contact with one another in order to work on common problems together, and intentionally trying to build very common languages, tools, things like that. So that we get to the point where we have that kind of aha moment. And not only do we understand what the folks in different disciplinary backgrounds, how they approach their work, but we modify each other's work so that we were able to speak that common language. So really, interactional expertise, when it's developed well, on the one hand, for the engineer, you might say something like, we're building ethics, policy, or critical literacy that they didn't previously have. And we're doing it in a way that is specific to the way that the ethicist or the artist might think about those types of, or use those languages, approach that kind of ethics, policy, and critical work that they do. And similarly, on the side of the ethicist or the artist or the lawyer or whoever it is that you're bringing into contact, you're trying to build that kind of like engineering or tech literacy. And I don't just mean like understanding the words. I mean, what you're trying to do is the stuff in the middle here. You're really trying to build a common language. You're trying to develop shared goals and values when it comes to asking the kind of questions that are important and valuing specific questions. valuing specific methodologies that you share in common. And in order to do that, what we do at Cradle is that we develop common tools, and those tools can be like conceptual tools, frameworks, they can be methodologies for getting work done. And certainly what we're going to talk about today is within that bucket of approaches. So the pilot projects that we're going to talk about today really were, in my mind, and I think in Chantal's mind as well, the goal of those projects was to bring together engineers, artists, and other folks to really break down that barrier between disciplines and start working towards shared concepts, frameworks, methodologies for doing things. And it adds, I should point out that this is not, the goal here really is to develop like transdisciplinary work, right? So this is work that, that is not just like, oh, I'm going to apply an engineering, I'm working with an ethicist, I'm an engineer, let's say, and I want to apply my engineering methodology to solve this problem. And the ethicist is going to go and do the methodology that they apply in philosophy, and then we'll publish some papers. Maybe, we'll put each other's names on it or something like that. Now, this is something different. This is like new common languages that didn't exist before, shared goals and values that morph the kind of ways of doing things. So it's very much transdisciplinary. It's not just like, putting your names on a project and doing things the way that you used to do things. It's really coming together with an open mind to change the way that you do your practice. Okay, so what's the approach at Cradle? Well, clearly it's interdisciplinary. We have a range of individuals from different backgrounds working in the lab, students and professors. This by design is diverse and inclusive. I've been very deliberate about trying to build a team that includes different perspectives, voices from different backgrounds, just to get the work done better. And this is from the ground up, the way that we choose research questions, the way that we develop our meetings in the lab, everything. We work on co-authorship model. That's important to state because a lot of the disciplines that are in the room tend to have like single authorship norms in their disciplines, or they tend towards like one, maybe two authors, but like three authors, just confusing in that, like in a context. I know philosophy can be like that. I've seen that law can be a little bit like that, although I think these things are changing, but it's worth mentioning because in engineering, it's common to have, 20 authors on a paper. And really the focus is on developing interactional expertise, like I said. The kinds of tools that I've developed over the past little while, and Chantal can talk about some of the tools that she's working with or some of the approaches that she's developing. I did these things called value maps. I'm not going to get into too many details, but just to give you a sense, like metaphor hacking, where you play around with metaphors as a means of kind of like developing a common understanding of what a technology should be or is. We work with this tool called social failure mode analysis, or these things called ethics settings maps that we do. So it's really like new engineering, ethical engineering tools that cross between kind of like ethics and in this case, engineering. And so at the Cradle STEAM Collective, really, if Chantal and I were talking the other day, and we kind of like landed on this statement. We're engaging. We feel like when it comes to STEAM and focusing on STEAM specifically, we like to strive to engage the power of the creative process to really critically interrogate AI and engineering practice. And this is not about like looking from the outside in. This is bringing art into the STEM, the STEM processes, the ways of doing things in STEM, and really building art and the critical lens that art brings to engineering practice into engineering and tech design as a fundamental and inseparable aspect of engineering. Just like you have electrical engineers, you have mechanical engineers, you have like civil engineers, like they work together seamlessly, yet most of the time, there's no reason why art and the critical lens that art brings to the process can't be fused into this new way of thinking about engineering and doing engineering. It's really, that's the transdisciplinary part of all this. So STEAM tool development and use is also something that we're looking at. We're getting there. I think this is very much Chantal's area, and she'll be talking about that very shortly. So Chantal, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Chantal's going to talk about some of the projects that are ongoing at the University of Ottawa. And Chantal, please feel free to just prompt me to advance the slides when you need them advanced.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I'll talk to you about, give you some context for the work that I've done when I bring artists and engineers to work together. And this, what you see on the screen at the moment, was basically our pilot project, where when I came to knock on the door of engineering, said, I'd like to do this, something that I wanted to do years ago. And since I was involved with the STEM building that was just being built, and I was taking care of the artwork outside, and so it'd be nice that there'd be artwork inside, which was in the plan initially, but the architects told me, budget cuts, what goes first? The art. So I knocked on the door of Nana Nis, who's responsible for the first floor of that building, and said, let's introduce the arts. And she said, if you can bring the artists, I deal with the engineers, so we can do this. So this is what we decided to do, to introduce, in this case, an art challenge to engineers. And this is what the prototype that came out of a winter design course. And we said, well, it's kind of nice. It works. It has a nice concept, but it's not really an artwork per se. So we decided to introduce the possibility of having a summer internship with engineers and artists together, working full-time in labs in engineering and in labs in visual arts, to create something out of it. And on the right-hand side is what was the result. And this piece is called Equilibrium. And it's essentially, to the idea behind it, if you can go to the next slide, is to encourage people to take the stairs as opposed to take the elevator. And people,
hold on.
Oh, I didn't realize there was sound to this.
Just give me a second. Okay, here we go.
There you go. So it's very brief video, but it shows you the interaction when people go up and down. Segments of the installation light up. And this is installed in the STEM building on campus. You can experience this every time you go to the STEM building. And the next one, the other installation that was, happening at the same time, if you go to the next slide, it's called Surface Tension, where students got together and sampled the waterways around campus, and they really took the diversity of the aquatic life that they found in the water as a metaphor for their STEAM experience. And that basically drove the visual and the movement decision of their installation. And this project was so interesting to students that we started with 2 engineers and 2 artists on each project. And this one, we ended up with 5 engineers, 1 biologist, and 2 artists, totally working. The extra ones were working for free. So the next slide will give you the interaction of that particular art piece. So the students really worked together initially, kind of not fully understanding each other, but really worked through the differences to finally kind of understand that they are not that different, even though they kind of have different pursuit. If you go to the next slide. So the success of these 2 installations really reinforced the value of multidisciplinarity work at Ottawa U. And we've done a number of things since then that we can maybe talk about in the question period. But in my view, also, it reinforced a deep, deep conviction that there are many benefits of introducing art to STEM teaching and practices. And that's what we did there. But the parameters that I put, and it's kind of repeating what Jason said, but in different terms, is really to create teams where artists, in my angle, artists and people of other disciplines really work as equal collaborators. And that's really key to STEAM definition for me. And that we can create conditions where these teams can experience transdisciplinarity. And this, to me, will allow the development of new ways of knowing, new ways of doing, and really, in the end, new ways of being, which will create social innovations, really. So that's the base for my research, which happens to be very similar to Jason's research. So now we call it our research objectives or direction. So we really want to focus on the development of conceptual and methodological frameworks and tools to empower multidisciplinary teams, STEAM teams specifically, so where art is involved, to achieve transdisciplinary knowledge and to create responsible, meaningful, innovative solutions to the complex problems that we face today. And we think that all of this will lead to societal changes. So do you want to set set this up?
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So here, yeah, I mean, so that sort of sets the groundwork that that Chantal, I mean, so perfectly brings to this collaboration. And so now I guess what we'll do is we'll turn to talking about the pilot project that was funded through the AI and Society Initiative specifically, to show some of the STEAM research that's going on at Cradle specifically. So
yeah, and when I got introduced to Jason's work and interests, I was very interested in working together because he really understood multidisciplinarity, especially when it comes to art. Because often people think, oh, art, let's bring art so that we make this pretty. But it's really not the angle that I want to explore. And we decided to work together and explore this through a pilot project. And the aim really was to leverage the unique lens that art can offer to critically examine, in this case, technology and the technology we build, and to reevaluate the meaning that it has and the function that it has in the world. So we decided, in the spirit of research creation, which is a term in the arts, to create this collective. So we have here the beautiful minds that got together. So emerging artists, engineers, artists, and communication specialists. So this is the team that we had initially, and we foresee that people will change, but the concept will remain the same. And all of these people we brought together to really explore and interrogate various impacts robotics and AI have on society. And also to look at the various ways that art and humanities can become really core to the practice of responsive innovation. And we realized that we had very similar objectives before we met, and it just makes it stronger in terms of a partnership. So I'll show you the first pilot project that we worked on. If you go to the next slide. It's called Calibrating Stretched Transparency, and it basically explores some of the logic, processes, and tools that decision makers use to support their decision making. In this case, in a large-scale techno-political climate project, like geoengineering was kind of the theme that we set out to explore. And in this case, we used artificial intelligence tools like PQCAN and CLIP for the visual, for the image generation, and mapping tools like the G projector by NASA for the mapping area. And we wanted to highlight some of the biases that these tools have, which in turn really influence decision makers that are using them. So I don't know if you want to add something to this, Jason?
Yeah, I love so what I love about this is just like we're, although these are pretty pictures, I can't emphasize enough what Chantal was mentioning. So the motivation here is really to go beyond just creating like pretty pictures for people to look at, right? And I think this is the mistake that oftentimes gets made when you start into these interdisciplinary collaborations and you're trying to figure out like, well, what is the role of some other discipline in your team? So for those of you who have ever worked in these large multidisciplinary research projects, I wrote a couple notes down here while Chantal was talking on the last slide. I've seen in the past where you're on a research team that maybe is centered in engineering and technology. You're in some of those initial meetings, and you've got maybe a lawyer and an ethicist in the room, and a bunch of engineers, and then you'll hear things like, oh, well, we were hoping that the lawyers could like help us work on some of the contracts that we've got to get put together for like, and then like the artist like, oh yeah, like could you do some illustrations or like drawings to like make
it pretty?
It's like, and the ethicist is there to like fill in all the research ethics board forms or something like that. It's like it's like there's the technology research that's going on, and then everybody else is like kind of like work for hire. And this is like a key insight. It's a moment where you can take a step back in a project and realize like we have not gotten to the interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary mode yet. And really breaking that down is important. So understanding what we're looking at on this slide, I think requires seeing the amazing pictures and the beauty of the art, but really digging into what it's meant to ask people to analyze, like or reflect on critically. So here, yeah, I mean we've got like these different shapes and representations here, without it being completely obvious in this frame, are really, so these are taken from different methods, like mathematical methods that are used to flatten spherical objects into two-dimensional planes. So if you're making a map of the globe, it's an interesting challenge to kind of like unwrap the globe into a flat plane and represent it in 2 dimensions. So, and there's like a history of power and bias that goes into a technology like a 2-dimensional map. So what you'll typically see in the maps that we're all familiar with from, say, our childhoods in school, or just like the maps that you see like in an atlas or on a poster, they tend to exaggerate northern countries and like the west countries in the west, and like they're very specifically designed to make like Europe and North America look proportionally larger than other areas on the globe, which is a bias. It makes it seem more important. They're more central on the maps and things like that. So the artists here are really playing around with like the different ways of unfolding maps and thinking about like global relationships in relationship to the climate crisis. There's like words scattered throughout here. So really like it's getting beyond the surface, just like the surface details here, and using this art to really think deeply about like, prompt questions in the tech design process. Like, okay, well, what decisions are we making about the use of AI in the climate crisis? How is that potentially going to bias certain people over others? What parts of the world should we be focused on in order to ask the right questions about climate change? How does AI play into doing all of that analysis, and so on and so forth? So that's really like, I mean, that's, I guess, the longest I've ever maybe talked about this, but every time I look at it again, this is the beauty of these projects. Like the more you think about them and the more they prompt you, the deeper the thought process goes, and the more type of criticism or like critical analysis you can bring to the use of technology, to the development of policy, and so on and so forth. All those 3 overlapping areas that I introduced earlier on.
Yeah, and in this
should I move to the?
Yeah, move
oh,
to
sorry.
the
Go ahead.
Yeah, move to the other slide. But I just wanted to summarize that really in this case, we really wanted to make the invisible biases a bit more visible in terms of influencing decision makers, and kind of stating that people most of the time don't even realize that those maps have biases. So that was one of the objectives.
Or that there are like 150 or 160 different ways of unfolding a globe, right? Like that was shocking to me. I'd never seen all those different representations.
True.
So it just makes you realize that, how much there is.
Those different map shapes are available on the website. We just took a sample here in the presentation, but you can interactively see all of them. So the second pilot that we did was we named I'm Honored to Serve, and it basically explores the insidious guise of digital environments made to generate user data, and in a way that it profits from the users that don't really suspect that they're providing free labor and free data to those free tools. So we wanted to highlight that we become a little bit complacent in giving that free labor and data, and because we gain from those free tools, but there's a cost to all this. And also we wanted to make visible that these conventions that are imposed on users that we don't always realize, as well as the level of design that is involved in producing something like what we're looking at here, an AI assistant, to really seduce the user into giving all this labor and data. So we used the Google Assistant, which is like Siri or Alexa, and we interviewed it for a job posting of assistant and a real assistant position. And we again tried to highlight its limitation and the designed personality that the creators gave it. So maybe we can have a little excerpt of the interview.
So this is a video that the artists produced as a part of the installation. So that picture that you're seeing here is the installation, just to give the overview. And then like all the, they created all these branding, the whole branding around this product. And Maeve was the AI product, this imaginary product that was supposed to be like the digital assistant. And so this is the actual text of the interview that they ran the Google Assistant through, branded as Maeve and kind of polished up using an AI generated avatar and then put to video just for, so I'll play this for about a minute just so that you can get a sense of how the whole thing progressed.
I'm honored to serve.
And these are the Google Assistant's actual answers.
I'm fun
right?
and dandy. Thank you for asking.
Unedited.
She, he, or they are good for people, but it is okay for a digital assistant like me. Thanks for asking. I'm not sure. Well, you could say I was made for this job. Oh, you know how it is. That's okay. Let me know if I can help with anything. I'm very flexible in the way that I work.
So this part here, the artists actually pulled information about the persona that Google said they were developing for...
I have a master's degree in listening, but there's still so much to learn.
Yeah, so you get a sense of how this goes. I think the video runs for a good 15-20 minutes or something like that. It's a pretty significant video. But yeah, it was just like a really interesting opportunity to kind of like look into the way that AI is gendered, and the moments where when you're interacting with these AI chatbots that you realize the team of developers has thrown in a prompt to get some data back from you. So it's not just like the AI is there to assist you. It's also like you're like those little captchas when you're trying to log into a site or something like that, and you're doing work to train AIs on like identifying what's a bicycle in the series of pictures or where the stoplights are. When you're interacting with these chatbots, they're constantly kind of peppering the conversation with prompts that seem very clearly designed to get you to do some work in that moment. So there's like a really interesting element of deception going on, and all sorts of interesting questions. Of course, like the whole aesthetic was drawn from old computer magazines from the 80s and 90s that the artists were using as inspiration. So it was a lot of fun. So anyway,
Yeah,
Chantal,
and I just wanted
to
add that the aesthetics of choosing the 80s was really because visually we think it has a lot of promise and a lot of functionality that it offers, but when you really dig through it, it's mostly promise and little functionality, as we saw in some of the response. Like when it hits a wall or a place where it can't answer, it just goes sometimes in very funny places, or just revert to asking questions to the user in a way to hide its limitation. But we were pretty happy. Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just going to jump in and say this was also pre-Chat GPT, which has, I think, taken things to another level. But it'd be interesting to kind of do a similar project, like see how Chat GPT responds to these types of things. I think we get a very different set of responses, probably a lot more of these like hallucinations that that people have started seeing in the art. But yeah, anyway. A lot of fun.
And we discovered through this experience that they designed, they had an assistant to design the personality of the AI assistant with Pixar to really shape a personality to it. Like we even knew where it had gone to school and had a whole personal history to it. But we're pretty happy with the result. It was picked up by the Museum of Science and Tech in their Ingenium channel. And we toured this exhibit a few places in Ottawa. And it was picked up recently by the Globe and Mail, the art critic of the Globe and Mail. And it came out in an article this weekend on May 25th, I think it was.
24th, 25th. Yeah. They were talking about it. It's great.
It talks about our installation and the use of art from a critical standpoint about AI. So we're pretty happy about that. So
yeah, it's fantastic. Can I'm looking at the time. Florian, can you just let me know, or Lisa, can you just let me know, are we good until 1 or do we have until 12:30? I just want to make sure that we're leaving time for. We're good until 1? Perfect. Okay, we've got a little bit of time then. All right, so Chantal, I'll leave it to you to give a little bit of background on art and the.
Yeah, we thought because of all the chatter that is now going on about generative AI, we thought we'd have a little reflection on the impact of AI on the creative process. And the first thing I did along those lines, I said, let's ask AI what it thinks about its impact on the creative process. And I used the AI tool Lex to ask a question, and this is the answer. Basically, it starts with an intro that has been, AI has long been a controversial subject, especially when it comes to machine learning and its potential impact on the creative process. AI has already begun to change the way we produce media, from automated animation sequence to voiceover replacement. But what does it mean to the future of creativity, and how can creators leverage the power of AI to create and innovate? And then it goes on to say that you can leverage AI because it's very efficient at generating ideas and concepts, then you can benefit from it because it can enhance the final products that you have visually with generative tools that generate visuals and videos. But it warns that you have to be careful of keeping a balance between innovation and the human creativity, and then summarizes those points. So it's pretty interesting text, good format, and in this case, quite accurate, but not terribly insightful in terms of its reflection. So if you go to the next, so I then asked myself the same thing, the same question, and it brought me to examine the definition of the creative process. And I just want to mention that the creative process that we're looking at here is basically now very recognized that it's a creative process used by all creative individuals, regardless of the disciplines, that be science, math, engineering, or art, or other, field. It's all, if you're producing creative material, you go through this process. And it's Wallace that came up with that model, and it's still very valid today, where you pose a problem, you prepare by collecting as much information as possible to the point of saturation. Then you let that information kind of simmer in the background, which they call incubation, where your brain processes the information and use your pattern recognition ability of your brain and free association, mostly as a subconscious background process to do the links together. And all of a sudden, usually when you do something else physically, like drive your car or take a shower, then you have the aha moment, which they call illumination, where you happen to come across the solution. And the next step is to verify if that solution that came to you is actually satisfying the original problem that you wanted to set for. And if it satisfies, then you go ahead and you elaborate your project. So if you go to the next one, what does that mean in terms of AI interaction? Well, the first bit of it, the problem definition, is something that the human has to get involved and do. And I think that's based on our human creativity or curiosity, actually, to question and explore the world that we live in. So that's a human-based pursuit. In terms of preparation or saturation, I think that's where AI has a leg up on us, because it can really process a tremendous amount of information that is unparalleled by our human brain. So on that section of the creative process, AI definitely has a leg up on us. But as far as incubation and illumination, because it's a process that is depending on pattern recognition, and we know that computers can do pattern recognition, but they cannot, at least yet, do the free associations of what we can do in our brains, of subconscious connections of information we gather with our experiences and our emotions, which are really human-based. So that AI can't do at the moment. And the verification part, well, the ability to evaluate results according to a set of values, not something that AI can do at the moment, as far as we know. So it remains at this point that AI is a very powerful tool, and it can be incorporated in the creative process, especially when it comes to the generation of information and ideas, early ideas, and as the early part of the creative process, but it does not yet substitute the human creative process. So maybe, yeah, here I just thought I'd share briefly some of the tools that our students are using today in our design class, multidisciplinary design class. We had a first assignment and we let them choose how to deliver the projects, and 7 out of our 27 students use some form of AI generated tools. So it's out there, people are using it, and it's not going to go away. And I thought I'd show just 2 examples of a visual that can be created And here it was asked to show a laser harp orchestra by Midjourney, and that's what the AI came back with. And the next one is asking to summarize, if you go to the next slide, to summarize Heidegger, the origin of the work of art in plain English for 4 sentences. So in those cases of summarizing or being objective in terms, or not, maybe not objective may not be the right word, but collecting information and summarizing it, the AI tools are very efficient. So if you go to the next slide. So at this point, generative AI is definitely a powerful tool, which, like other technological innovations of the past, as we see in the screen, they will create an inflection point in the history of creativity and the creative process. However, despite the level of sophistication that is reached at this point, the AI that we know of at the moment does not supersede human creativity yet. It is its power of and the power of the human brain to innovate through unique connections between information, emotions, and experience of the individual. However, it's a very important tool that we should leverage because we can access really large databases of information to feed our uniquely human creative process. So we're not obsolete yet. Our creative mind is not obsolete yet. Of course, that's a personal view in this case, up for debate. So that's yeah, what I wanted to
so I just thought,
bring up.
Yeah, so we thought we would wrap up the presentation just by offering a little bit of reflection on what we've learned through conducting this pilot project. And I think, and Chantal, feel free to jump in whenever here, but certainly when you're bringing these disciplines together, artists and engineers, artists and people working on policy, it really does require extended close contact in order to develop that interactional expertise. From my perspective, anyway, there really are no shortcuts. And I would go so far as to say that it's like you have to be in regular conversation about the projects, and allow as much space as possible for asking questions, but always by overlaying a lens of like, why is that question being asked? Where is it coming from? Like, what does it tell me about the individual and the discipline from which they come from? And how does that, and am I interpreting it right? Like, it takes a lot of very active listening and active interaction in order to get to a place where you're sort of breaking through those boundaries. In addition, I think it requires real projects. So the idea of like sitting down and like, kind of like navel gazing and thinking about like, how could you do STEAM effectively and coming up with some sort of like, theory without actually doing it. It's just not a way of, of getting to that interactional expertise. And again, always paying very careful attention to the disciplinary norms. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that, Chantal? I know that you have so many insights, amazing insights from other work that you've done in the past.
What I've seen over and over again, when you reach the level of transdisciplinarity, and it's as much as a human condition that you have to make sure that you create as the discipline thing that is going on. What happens is a level of respect that is unseen in other environments, is what I've experienced. A level of respect, a level of understanding of the value of the other. And that is priceless. And that's why I'm convinced that the more we set up these teams that achieve this level of trust, essentially, and respect for each other, we're going to change the way that we look at problems, the way we experience the world, and the way society will go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not, I put here like, it produces critical approaches to engineering design, but it's not, again, like I can't emphasize this enough. It's not just that you're sort of like tacking the artist's view onto the process. I think when this is done well, it changes the way that everybody understands how they go about doing the work that they do. So the engineer, it's like you can't do your work without, I don't know, some sort of software analysis tool or understanding the how project management works or something like that. I'm trying to find a great analogy. It's hard when you're doing this transdisciplinary stuff, but it's not like it's not like that. It's like you're really changing the way that you're like. It's like you can't do engineering design without this way of doing it, without having that skill set and knowledge in the room, and just like deploying it when you're doing the work. And that's as much for the artist as it is for the engineer who comes into this experience, right? The artist becomes this like it is just doing engineering design by virtue of this transdisciplinary knowledge, the same way that the engineer would be doing engineering design as by virtue of this transdisciplinary knowledge. So future directions, I mean, as Chantal mentioned, like the work that came out of this pilot was really instrumental and useful in helping us understand the possibilities of this type of research and work. And so, yeah, I mean, the pilot has turned into a large insight grant proposal that's currently under consideration, and we have every intention of turning that into a big chunk of what's going on at Cradle and hopefully at the University of Ottawa as part of these interesting collaborations, like with the CLTS and the AI in Society initiative and other groups on campus and elsewhere. So that's it for us today. So I'm more than happy to turn it over to Q&A now, and we're around for the rest of the half hour. So. Thank you very much again for
thank you
for having us here to talk about this. Okay, I can see the Q&As now. So I'm happy to. So there's like a little thing that says answer live here, but I don't know. I don't want to click buttons. Like I'm not going to type the answer. So I'll just voice over this. So from Elizabeth, thanks for an interesting presentation. What are your best approaches for overcoming resistance from potential participants who have a hard time relating to the other side in interdisciplinary projects? Oh, that's a great question. Chantal, do you want to? So this is like, I take it to be like, you form a group of individuals and, Melissa, did you want to voice over oh, wait. Oh, somebody's going to answer this live. Okay. I think you're going to, I'm just looking at the screen and trying to figure out what's going on here. No problem. This is fantastic. Chantal, do you want to jump in?
Hang on, let me reread this. Thanks. What are the best approach for overcoming resistance for potential participants who have a hard time relating to the other side of interdisciplinary project? I think there's a number of tools, and that's what my PhD research essentially is about. It's really finding ways to set up the scenes properly so that students, professionals, and researchers, depending on the groups that you have to deal with, get into that space of trust, and then can actually do the work. I use things that are absolutely not related to the arts, of getting people together and having discussions. Food is a great way to break down those barriers in terms of getting to know the person for the person first, and then really sharing in terms of professionals. I think there's a lot of that needs to happen before you even get to the material that you want to talk about. And I found that healthy conflicts is kind of required too, like not to be afraid of having these misunderstanding of reluctance kind of brought forward to the forefront so that it's discussed, because that's often where innovation will happen. If you stick to your guns and the person opposed to you in terms of concept sticks to their gun, and then they discuss it to a point where they come with something new, that's where an innovation happens. So I guess some tools involve some human setup, and time. Time is another important factor. And understanding what the other does and the value that they bring. And often my experience is people cannot express clearly their own value, and don't always have a good understanding of the epistemology of their own discipline. And that's part of the tools that I'm creating too, is really making sure that you know yourself before you can meet the other. And the more you know about yourself, you're in a better situation to meet the other in all realms of our lives, I think, but in these contexts specifically.
Yeah, in my course, you know, I don't have so the course that I teach is grad course that has like law students, students with engineering and business backgrounds and arts backgrounds, some philosophy students. Just trying to think, like, yeah, like computer science. Anyway, it's a very interdisciplinary course, and the way that, and so the course is very much focused on getting people to reflect on the framings, that those professional framings or personal framings that they bring to the design context. And so one of the things that I've been using in the last couple of years is what I call an interdisciplinary design journal. And so I think, like Chantal is mentioning, and Chantal, was I using that when you were in the course? I can't remember. Yeah, so I get students to kind of like reflect very specifically on the interactions that they're having with teammates. So this is most of the work that they do in that course is like group-based projects and assignments. And so I get them each individually to reflect on kind of like, what are the things that I'm bringing to the table, and you know, how am I seeing those my own personal framings or professional framings kind of create conflict or generate interesting questions in these interactions that I'm having in my teams while doing these projects. And so I you know, I've developed a series of kind of like 20 or 30 different prompts for students to reflect on. And by the end of the semester, what I find is that, you know, students at the beginning are kind of like confused about why they're doing this journaling, and they're not really sure. They're sort of mostly thinking about themselves. They're kind of inside their own heads, like we are so often with our own the work that we do. But that by the end of the semester, they're really, you know, many of the students at least are really starting to see the way that you know, when they even ask a question to their group members, or they propose like a way of working through a problem that they're encountering in the design projects that they're working on, they're starting to recognize like, oh, this is very much what I'm bringing from my computer science background or from my law background. You know, you constantly see like the computer, you know, if you've got like students who've never taken really many humanities courses, mostly technology courses, at the beginning of the term, they'll say things like, oh, the lawyers are always asking questions about rights and policies and like digging into the deeper questions. And I'm just like thinking on the surface level, I just want to make this thing work. I just want to get things done. And then by the end of the semester, they're like, it's so good that they asked that question, because now I understand the different kind of functions that I need to think about. So you start seeing them getting there and understanding, you know, how to respect the way that each other are working through these problems. And similarly, like the law students or philosophy students will say things like, you know, I'm endlessly asking these questions and criticizing. And then I realize at some point, like, we kind of just got to get some things done. Like we have to make decisions about like how to move forward, even though we're faced with these complex ethical issues. So it takes time. It takes a lot of like deliberate critical reflection, and it just takes patience and open conversation, because often like the people who have a hard time relating get frustrated because it's hard, right? Like it can be hard to it can be hard to challenge yourself in a way that is like, you know, feels like it's just preventing work from getting done at first, but then later on you start realizing that it's actually preventing like if you try to overcome those hurdles too quickly, you're going to slip into one disciplinary mode where like some dominant mode starts taking over, and you just like start working as the lawyer and constantly asking those questions, or just like as the engineer and just like trying to get things done without reflecting too much critically. So yeah, it's like getting to that point where you recognize the value of working, like of breaking those barriers down and finding a common language that's really at the like that's the end goal here. That is the like that interdisciplinary expertise, or that interactional expertise. Great question.
Yeah, some specifics about some of the experience I had with students, and students may be a bit more flexible than, you know, very deep researchers and very specific fields. So, you know, there's a bit of that most likely involved as well. But what we found is the engineers, as you expressed differently, Jason, they tend to want to converge really quickly. Want to get the thing done, and they really focus on the how do I get to my solution, and typically it's not too much brainstorming and options at the front, and really they want to converge quickly. And artists tend to really want to slow down the process and ask deep questions as to why do you want to do this. Same as philosophers, where they really want to get to the essence of the thing. And once they understand this, and it happened in the project that I showed you initially, especially in the surface tension project, where I got the artists coming to me and said, they can't listen, they don't listen, the engineers are not listening to my ideas, and they wanted to have kind of an automatic response. And I said, you have to work this out, because it's by really getting to it and defending your point. And if you can't defend it with me, I'm sure if they can't defend it, you can't defend it with them. But they ended up really being able to tell each other how they worked, and the engineers understood in the end that making something because it's cool was interesting, but it was a lot more powerful if you made something cool that had deeper meaning. And that's, at least in that project, in that particular team, that was a turning moment, where they understood that the benefit of going deeper, slowing down, and really finding a key fundamental theme to drive their development. So when you get that's information that really leads to a different level of knowing.
So there's another question here, and it says, not directly related to what you discussed, but since there are no other questions, any comments on the ethics of generative systems like Midjourney and DALL-E? So what about the ethics of Midjourney and DALL-E? Yeah, you know, I mean, I'll just jump in. First of all, and like, if you know, I'll go one step further and just say, like, let's just throw, like, those are kind of like visual systems. As far as that is, Midjourney is one of the visual generative AIs. Am I right about that, Chantal? Are you familiar with Midjourney?
I haven't used it. My students have used it. I think it definitely can do visuals. I don't think it's limited to visuals.
Okay. But let's just throw Chat GPT in there as like something that can help you do text generated artistic works, creative works, and whatnot. You know, making arguments and things like that. So yeah, I mean, so the ethic, like, the first thing I'll say is, like, the ethics of these systems is, like, you know, the questions that we need to ask, like, in addition to the questions that we've been asking about, you know, AI generally, like, you know, questions around bias or transparency or fairness, all those kind of things. data rights about access to data. Like it's all true with those, and then some, right? Like they are the text-based generative AIs are proving to be disruptive in a way that I think people are just starting to wrap their heads around. I don't have any answers for you. I just have, like, all I can say is it's kind of like blowing the ethics of AI world apart a little bit because of the number of questions that are being raised. So it's like a lot of work going on. So I can talk a little bit about the work that's going on at Partnership on AI. So Florian mentioned off the top that I have a position at Partnership on AI, which is a large. It's a not-for-profit that is focused on developing different tools and recommendations and basically any kind of knowledge that can help to improve the state of the AI ecosystem in terms of like making it better for humans, making sure that technology is developed responsibly, and so on and so forth. And we've been doing a lot of work on generative AI over the last couple of years, and are kind of doubling down on it right now. So we've come out with sort of like frameworks for the responsible use of synthetic media in large organizations. So that we've got partners like the BBC and who are signed on to this framework and help develop it to really think deeply about like how we procure these systems, how we deploy these systems, how we use them in day-to-day work. So then even academically, I sit on an expert panel, NeurIPS, which is one of the largest AI conferences in the world. And they've been developing their response and like ethical norms and codes of ethics for the conference to think about like, how do you deal with using these things in the context of scientific publication? So where people are getting, are essentially using these tools to write their scientific papers, right? They put a bunch of data in, and then they say like, write a paper that kind of summarizes all this work. So just like the list of ethical issues that we need to deal with from the emergence of generative AI in the last like 2-3 years, really with the kind of in the last 6 months with the text-based AI, we're just starting to wrap our heads around it. But certainly it's a good time to get into this work if you're interested. The future is bright if you want to do like AI ethics focused on generative AI. Chantal?
Yeah, I think at least from an educational standpoint, and not necessarily specifically to these two tools, but to the tools in general. I know the University of Ottawa had to come up with a policy for students, right? What's the ethics of submitting work that involves AI, generative AI? And essentially at this point, it's, yes, you can use it, but you have to identify it and you have to quote it, just like you would quote someone else's work officially. And there's tools now out there to be able to detect if a text was generated, and it's pretty good. And there's actually a number of them, so you can compare between themselves. But I think it'll get more and more complex to even just be able to identify work that has been generated, and recognizing the partnership. But I think once you use it as a collaborator, and I've used it just for the fun of it to build my bio that I presented at a different conference, and you can definitely improve your information, but you have to declare it. Essentially, that's the ethical part of it. And
Perfect.
there was a third question, but it just says better part.
Oh, I answered that. I typed an answer up. So this was an individual asking whether or not there'd be, we could share slides and things like that. So I'm happy to share the slides, but also, Florian, this has been recorded. So
Exactly. We will
be
share
posted
the recording,
somewhere.
Yeah, we will share the recording on the YouTube channel of the Center for Law, Society and Technology. So thank you. Thank you so much, Chantal and Jason, for this super interesting conversation, for like filling the question from the audience, and yeah, and on ChatGPT 4, I will just like a word of caution. This morning I was discussing with one of my colleagues who actually tried to do this with apparently my scholarship and my bio, and ChatGPT. Well, I would love my promotion committee to actually ask ChatGPT question about me, because according to ChatGPT, I wrote around like 10 books with the leading publishers around the world. Some of them is not even in my field. So, and apparently ChatGPT cannot figure out the book I actually authored or edited, even in English. So I'm not 100% certain it can be used to help out in academia. Although, yeah, I would love to have written all of those books to happen to my promotion file.
Yeah, and it can generate bibliography, sorry, that are completely fictitious.
Oh yeah, no, there is an hallucination effect that is quite interesting, and to be aware, to not believe like, you know, just because it's produced by an AI, it is actually intelligence. Anyway, on those words, so thank you again, Jason and Chantal, for this super cool conversation, and your like amazing work at the intersection of art and STEM and public policy, because I think it informs us about public policy discourses. And thank you for everybody in attendance. And we look forward to welcome you again for New Way in Society and CLTS virtual events. Have a nice day, everybody. Bye-bye.